So here's an overview walking through each of the sections. Probably the most distinct section that we've got is the very first one that frames what we've experienced through the lens of a mass disaster and the different psychological stages that populations and organizations go through. This is essential to understand because we're going to be living with this for several years. It's going to have a ripple effect, and we need to understand that, especially as we bring people back and there are new stressors and new triggers that they haven't experienced before. The second article builds some understanding of the new burden that managers face. Most are task-oriented managers, and according to Gallup, that's about 82% of managers. Now they have the additional social and emotional needs of workers coming back that they're simply not prepared for. And we're very concerned that this new burden can lead to burnout and also just a drop in production and engagement. I don't know about you, but 2020 has been one of the most disruptive and polarizing years that I've ever experienced. So I partnered with Dr. Jernigan to help put these events into context and provide tools to safely talk about these and other unsettling events in our workplace. Dr. Jernigan is concerned that if we can't have a safe way to have these kinds of conversations to unpack them together, that the alternative is that we bottle them up. And if we bottle them up, then there's only two places they can go. They will either go internally, and that unprocessed anxiety will erode our mental and physical health, or they will get expressed in damaging behavior. In May, I began to see all of my clients going through some phase of Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. I wrote a blog on it, and that blog became our most requested article, which then turned into a webinar. We've taken that and updated it and included an article on why everybody is going through one of the 5 stages of grief. One of the goals of the article is not only to give us understanding of where we might be individually in these 5 stages, but also take away some of the stigma of talking about this in the workplace and giving us some language, common language, to help us all process through together. In the final article of this section, we talk about why employees have lost their trust in the institution's ability and organizations to protect them through times like this. This article talks about why we need to rebuild this trust and how we go about doing that. Organizations will have to weave rebuilding trust into every touch point they have with their employees. The next section looks at how do we prepare our managers. Managers are either the linchpin or the Achilles heel of all organizations during this critical transition. The first article looks at the gap between what they're competent in traditional management and where they need to be. The second article in this section points to lessons that we've learned in classrooms that work with psychologically at-risk children. The skill set that teachers are developing is called social emotional literacy. Now, in the workplace, we call this emotional intelligence, but this takes emotional intelligence into a whole process and training model. In the third article, we took some lessons we learned from a military expert on how managers deal with the fog of war, how they narrow the battlefield and provide managers with more focused attention. We've used that and applied it to the Gallup Q12, the 12 elements for engaging employees. And our conclusion is that there's 5 essential elements in that Q12 that we can narrow our focus, make it easier for managers, but also more helpful for employees. The final article introduces a tool that managers can use built on what's called dialectic therapy. Dialectic therapy is a storytelling methodology used in groups that have experienced either trauma or tragic events. Collective storytelling process helps individuals and groups process through their experience, give it meaning, and provide a way to move forward. We've included 3 story templates in the workbook for this section that you can utilize. The next section deals with building a resilient workforce. The first article in this section explores how we find a healthy rhythm to this new work world that we're in. It looks at some of the health side effects of this hybrid work and preventative strategies. If I only had one article to choose for building resiliency, it would be this next article, and it explores sleep, and it is a synthesis of the research that we've been conducting over the last 5 years in improving the quality of our sleep during these stressful times. The next article explores another very vital strategy for improving resiliency, and it's improving engagement. And we explore how to improve engagement by playing to our natural strengths, what we naturally do best and enjoy most. When we activate our natural strengths, we're releasing dopamine. When we get into that concentrated, what you might call a flow state, that releases endorphins. Both of those are revitalizing hormones for getting through the day, and it's very important that on a daily basis, we're releasing those chemicals by playing to our strengths. Some have described 2021 as the largest change management experiment in history. Now, we've added another element to that. It's the mental health side of change management. Change is stressful. When people are coming out of a mass disaster or traumatic experiences, they have many hidden trigger points. So the more you can reduce that stress, the more you're going to have an easy time of bringing people in and reacclimating them to the new work rhythms. Adding this mental health component to change management is something that's distinct about what Mindshift has developed over the last 10 years. We call it the right brain side of change. The final article in this section builds on the work we did through the Healthy Workplace Nudge. That book came out in 2018, and it addressed the chronic challenge we have with health in our workplace and our nation, and how that affects engagement and performance. In this article, we're laying the foundation for a more long-term strategy. Before the pandemic, we were already on an unsustainable health trajectory. More than 70% of our workforce has some form of chronic disease or is obese or overweight. 84% of our health costs are consumed treating chronic disease. It's rising at a 7% compounded rate, which means it will double before 2030. The groundbreaking insight we came upon in our research is that stress is the primary driver of the unhealthy coping behaviors that lead to chronic disease and obesity. So if the chronic condition was unsustainable, all the pandemic has done is accelerated the trend and the timeline. If stress is the primary driver behind the unhealthy coping behaviors, then let me give you a window into what else is coming down the road. Up to 90 million Americans have experienced either a level 1 or level 2 trauma. Now let me put that in perspective for you. Prior to the pandemic, 4 in 100 employees had some form of trauma, post-traumatic stress. Returning from the pandemic, those numbers are estimated to be 3 in 10. That is more than 100-fold increase. So the pandemic has turned what was a chronic condition into something acute, more near term. It will take ourselves some time to get our heads around proper strategies, but we're laying the foundation, and we've got a book that really outlines the strategy for the long-term goal of building resiliency in a healthy workforce. The final section in the book deals with the romance and reality of this new hybrid form of work. There was early euphoria as we went to work from home conditions on what looked like a smooth transition. But this is brand new territory for us. We have not gained enough experience to know how to properly structure this work or help people remain sustainable. Let me give you an example. My brain consumes more energy through the lens than it does in live environments. In live environments, your brain consumes about 20, maybe 30% of your overall calories per day. That's a lot. It's the most calorie-consuming organ in your body. In this environment, we're consuming 40 to 50% of our overall calories. Our firm has been tracking this for several years using the latest health tracking devices. Here's what we found. In a recent 4-hour workshop that I delivered, I consumed more than 3,200 calories in 4 hours. One of the tracking devices that I use translates the strain on your body to walking equivalency. How many miles did you walk? In that 4-hour workshop, it listed that I walked 35.6 miles. That was the strain. We've come up with a rough calculation on the amount of strain from the work that you're doing. So for example, if you're working an 8-hour day, 6 of those hours are in this virtual environment. You're working the equivalency of a 14-hour day. And I've been coaching people who are working 10-hour days with 8 hours on the screen. That's the equivalent of an 18-hour day. So if you're wondering why by 3 p.m. in the afternoon you're completely drained, this is the reason. So we address that, and we go into more of the implications and how to manage it in the workbook. So where do we go from here? By the end of the year, we will have a longer view version of this. So think of this as what's now, what's next, and then the longer view. The purpose of these magazines is not only to keep you current, but help you get ahead of the curve to anticipate what's coming so you can not only prepare yourself, but prepare your organization to become more resilient and be ready for anything that might come up in 2021. Take care. I look forward to talking to you.